Have you ever caught yourself living a life that doesn't quite feel like yours? You wake up, get ready, move through the day, tick every box: school, work, relationships, responsibilities, and from the outside, you look fine, maybe even successful. But when everything goes quiet, something inside feels off. It's that small, aching space between who you are and who you're supposed to be. You tell yourself it's normal, that everyone feels a little lost sometimes. But what if it isn't just a passing phase? What if that low hum of discomfort isn't proof something's wrong with you, but a signal from something right inside you, something that's been waiting too long to be heard? Carl Jung once said that the real tragedy isn't the death of the body, but the slow death of the soul while the body keeps walking. And that's exactly what happens when you live a life built from someone else's blueprint. You turn into a kind of ghost, still showing up, still smiling, but fading a little more each day. You laugh when you should, nod when expected, perform every version of fine. You chase goals that look impressive on paper: promotions, grades, titles. And each time you reach one, the satisfaction dissolves faster than the last. Why? Because success that isn't yours can't feed your spirit, no matter how shiny it looks. You did everything right. You were disciplined, responsible, hard-working, and yet something aches. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded in becoming everything the world wanted and nothing your soul asked for. It's not a loud kind of pain. It's quiet, a slow kind of suffocation. You don't collapse all at once. You fade. Layer after layer of shoulds and supposed tos press down until the person underneath starts to forget what they ever wanted. You become the character society loves, well-mannered, efficient, pleasant, and in the process, you misplace the person who once dared to dream before the world handed them a checklist. And you feel it, even if you don't talk about it. That heaviness before bed, when nothing's actually wrong, but nothing's right either. That Sunday night knot in your stomach. That sudden, almost guilty question that slips in quiet: is this all there is? Most people run from that voice. We drown it out with noise, endless scrolling, constant busyness, new goals, another show, another coffee. Because silence is dangerous. In silence, truth shows up. And the truth is this: somewhere along the way, you stopped living and started performing. Here's the hardest part. The world will applaud your performance. You'll be praised for being reliable, polite, productive, perfectly put together. And those compliments will land, but they'll feel hollow, won't they? Because deep down you'll know they're clapping for your mask, not your face. The problem isn't that you're lost. It's that you've walked someone else's path for so long you've forgotten the sound of your own footsteps. That's where the conflict begins. Your soul wants to grow, to explore, to express, but the world around you, with all its rules and routines, tells you to stay put. And that tension becomes a silent war inside you. Safety versus truth. Comfort versus meaning. Maybe that's why you're tired, even when you've rested. Maybe that's why each achievement fades. Because you're spending all your energy keeping an illusion alive, protecting a version of yourself that no longer fits. Jung called that the betrayal of the self, the moment you trade authenticity for approval, silence your inner voice just to blend in. It doesn't happen overnight. It erodes slowly, through small compromises you barely notice, until one day you wake up a stranger in your own story. But maybe, just maybe, the emptiness isn't an enemy. Maybe it's a beginning. That ache you feel might be your real self knocking from beneath the surface, whispering, "Hey, I'm still here." Because the truth is, you were never meant to live inside someone else's narrative. You were meant to write your own. And that's what we'll explore next. How you were trained to forget. How the world gently built a mask so convincing you started to think it was your skin. This isn't about rebellion. It's about remembering. Because before you can live your life, you have to find it first. When you were a kid, you didn't wear a mask. You laughed too loud, you asked questions that made adults pause. You imagined whole worlds before breakfast. You didn't measure yourself against anyone. You just were. Every day felt like fresh snow, untouched, waiting for you to leave your prints. And then, little by little, the world started to tidy you up. Don't be so loud. Don't be so sensitive. Be realistic. Act normal. Each correction landed like a tiny cut, not deep, but real. And every time you obeyed, you handed over a small piece of yourself. Not because you wanted to, but because you wanted to belong. That's how the mask was born. At first, it's innocent, just small adjustments. Tone down here, fit in there. But after a while, it becomes habit. You start hiding the parts of you that feel too bright, too messy, too different. The more you hide, the less you recognize yourself. One day, you wake up, and the mask isn't something you wear, it's something you are. You become the safe version of yourself, the one everyone can handle. Polished, predictable, easy to like. And when you learn that approval brings affection, you chase it like oxygen. Because in a world built on performance, applause feels like love. But love built on performance isn't love, it's a transaction. I'll like you as long as you keep being exactly who I want you to be. And deep down, you know it. That's why compliments sometimes feel like pressure in disguise. That's why you hold your breath, hoping no one sees the parts you've hidden away. So you keep the mask on. You smile through exhaustion. You say, "I'm fine," even when your chest feels heavy. You tuck your dreams into boxes marked later, so no one can call them foolish. And little by little, you start confusing numbness with peace. The world rewards this disguise. School teaches obedience, not wonder. Work praises productivity, not creativity. Society applauds competition, not connection. And all the while, the real you, the one who comes alive when you paint, write, dance, imagine, gets buried a bit deeper under should and must. They tell you that this is adulthood, that being responsible means abandoning the parts of you that still dream, that growing up means silencing the child who once believed in impossible things. But that child, that wild, curious, luminous soul, was never wrong. He was free. You didn't lose yourself in one dramatic moment. You were simply trained to forget. Trained to swap authenticity for acceptance. To follow rules written for lives that had nothing to do with yours. And the cruelest part, the mask works. It earns approval, promotions, praise. It protects you from rejection, but it also starves you of real connection. Because no one can truly love you while you're hidden. They can only love the costume. And every time they do, it confirms the lie you've carried for years. That your truth is too much to be seen.
Here's the paradox. The more you become what others want, the more invisible you become. What makes you unforgettable isn't your perfection, it's your presence. Not how well you control yourself, but how bravely you show yourself. And there comes a moment for everyone at some point when the mask starts to crack. Sometimes it happens quietly after burnout. Sometimes it happens suddenly after a loss. Or maybe it's on the day you finally get everything you thought you wanted and still feel empty. That's when you realize it. The mask didn't protect you, it imprisoned you. You start to see the trade you made. That belonging at the cost of yourself isn't belonging, it's abandonment. And that's why so many people are tired all the time, not from doing too much, but from pretending too long, pretending to be fine, pretending to be normal, pretending to be what the world finds comfortable.
So the question changes. It's no longer, who do they want me to be? It becomes, who was I before the world taught me to forget? That's the moment the real journey begins. Not by reinventing yourself, but by remembering yourself. You don't have to create a new identity, you have to peel away the one that was built for you. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The mask wasn't made to protect you, it was made to protect the system. A free person, one who feels, imagines, questions, creates, is unpredictable. And unpredictable people can't be controlled. That's why the world teaches conformity so early. It isn't afraid of your failure, it's afraid of your freedom. But freedom doesn't always look like rebellion. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's the simple act of saying, no, that's not me anymore. The soft courage of saying yes to something that actually makes you feel alive. That's when the remembering truly begins, when you stop living to be acceptable and start living to be real. And even if no one else understands it yet, you'll feel it. A small pulse under your ribs, steady and strong, whispering, finally. It doesn't begin with fireworks. It starts quietly, like your own breath finally catching up to you after years of running. Maybe it's a morning when you just can't open that laptop again, or a song on the radio hits something raw that you didn't even realize was aching. Maybe you're driving, the light changes, and for a split second, the noise inside and the noise outside both hush. And in that silence, you feel it, the weight of everything you've been pretending to be. That's the beginning, not the transformation, the remembering. Something ancient stirs deep inside. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. A calm, unmistakable voice that says, "This isn't me." And the moment you hear it, you know. Even if you can't explain it yet, even if you're afraid to act on it, you can't unhear it. At first, you'll fight it. You'll tell yourself you're overthinking. You'll force gratitude. Other people have it worse. I should just be thankful. You'll bury the truth under routines, responsibilities, logic. You'll hold on to the mask because at least it's familiar. But once you've tasted truth, comfort stops working. It's like trying to go back to sleep after realizing you've already woken up. You start noticing cracks in things that used to make sense. The job that drains you. The relationships that only exist on the surface. The goals you used to chase that now feel hollow. At first, it's disorienting. The map fades, the coordinates blur. Because when the illusion collapses, you don't just lose who you aren't, you lose everything that came along with the performance. It feels like an ending. And in a way, it is. It's the death of the false self. The version that smiled to belong, that said yes just to stay safe, that hustled for worthiness. Letting it go feels like grief, because you built your whole life around keeping it alive. But here's the secret no one warns you about. The death of what's false is also the birth of what's real.
When the noise fades, life returns in ways you forgot were possible. Colors seem warmer. Time moves slower, like life is breathing in sync with you again. You start to notice tiny miracles, sunlight across the room, the taste of coffee you didn't rush through, the sound of your own laughter, unplanned and unfiltered. You start to feel again. It's awkward at first, like using muscles that have been asleep for years. You may cry more easily, laugh louder, fall quiet when you used to fill the silence. Everything feels new because, in a sense, it is. You're meeting life again without the buffer of pretense. And then that inner voice, the one you tried to silence, starts getting stronger. Not bossy, not demanding, just honest. It doesn't tell you to burn everything down. It asks for something far more courageous: honesty. Be honest about what hurts. Be honest about what feels empty. Be honest about what you really want, even if it terrifies you to say it out loud. The truth is rarely comfortable, but it's always freeing. Honesty doesn't always look pretty. Sometimes it looks like falling apart just enough to fall into place. Piece by piece, you start to rebuild, not into someone new, but into the person you've always been underneath the pretending. You begin to remember the things that make you come alive, the kind of work that makes time disappear, the people who make you laugh until you forget what you were anxious about, the mornings that don't feel like battles because you actually want to wake up to your own life. You realize freedom isn't about escaping responsibility, it's about aligning with reality. It's having the courage to live in sync with what's true for you, even when others don't understand. It's choosing presence over performance, truth over approval. And that's when your real life starts to take shape. Not because the outside world suddenly shifts, but because you do. You stop chasing permission. You stop apologizing for your lightness, your darkness, your depth, your strangeness. You don't need all the answers anymore. You just need to be honest enough to keep asking real questions. That honesty changes everything. You walk differently, slower but with purpose. You speak differently, quieter but more certain. You choose differently, not out of fear, but out of alignment.
And other people feel it. Some pull away, unsettled by the mirror you present, because your authenticity calls out the places they've hidden their own. But others begin to wake up alongside you. They see in you something they lost in themselves: permission. That's how remembering spreads, not through speeches or convincing, but through presence. One person remembering who they are gives silent permission for another to do the same. Maybe that's the hidden purpose in all of this. Maybe remembering yourself isn't just for you. Maybe the moment you come alive again, you light a small torch, and in its glow, others see their own path take shape. Rebellion doesn't always look like raised fists or broken rules. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's the calm, steady act of saying no. No to the things that drain you. No to the roles that shrink you.
No to the endless demand that you betray yourself just to belong. Because the greatest rebellion isn't against the world around you, it's against the part of you that still believes you need its approval.
The system isn't afraid of chaos. It feeds on it. What it truly fears is clarity. A human being who thinks for themselves, who feels deeply, who slows down enough to notice, who moves from truth instead of pressure. That kind of person can't be managed. You were never made to be a product measured by numbers or likes or performance charts. You were made to be alive. And being alive, truly alive, is the most radical act in a world addicted to distraction. The machine thrives on your attention, your fear, your constant sense of not enough. As long as you're chasing the next goal, the next improvement, the next identity upgrade, you'll never pause long enough to realize you were already whole underneath it all. But when you finally stop running, when you dare to sit in stillness and meet yourself without disguise, that's when the machine begins to lose its grip. You stop consuming and start creating. You stop comparing and start connecting. You stop waiting for permission and start living. And that's the moment you become dangerous. Not because you want to destroy anything, but because you no longer feed the illusion.
Authenticity spreads faster than any algorithm. It cuts through propaganda like light through fog. You don't have to shout your truth, you only have to embody it. In a world that wants you anxious, you stay grounded. In a world that wants you numb, you feel deeply. In a world that wants you compliant, you choose consciously. Each of those choices, small, daily, deliberate, is an act of quiet rebellion. But don't confuse rebellion with rage. True rebellion is seeded in love. Love for truth, love for freedom, love for the infinite possibility of a world that remembers itself. Because when you begin freeing yourself, you send out an invitation, a silent permission slip for others to do the same. It starts small, a single honest conversation, a moment where you don't pretend, a refusal to laugh at something that isn't funny. That's how every revolution begins, not with millions shouting, but with one person whispering, "I'm done pretending." The old world was built on masks and pretending. The new one, quietly, steadily coming to life, is built on presence. It's forming through ordinary people who listen to the truth inside them, even when it costs them comfort, even when they're misunderstood. Because what the world truly needs isn't more followers, it's more selves. You don't have to burn the system down, you just have to stop feeding it your fear. The moment you stop treating fear as sacred currency, the whole structure begins to starve. Remember, rebellion doesn't start with movements, it starts with moments. That second you realize that being yourself was never a risk, it was always the point. At first, awakening feels like breaking, but eventually you realize it's not destruction, it's opening. You're not losing your old life, you're letting go of everything that was never truly yours. The labels, the roles, the expectations, they fall away like autumn leaves, and what's left is simple, bare, alive.
You stop searching for meaning somewhere out there and start finding it right here. In the way sunlight brushes your face in the morning, in the quiet rhythm of your breath when you finally stop rushing, in the taste of coffee you take the time to actually feel. It's not dramatic, it's sacred in its simplicity. You realize the life you spent years building wasn't meant to be found in achievement, but in awareness, in being present enough to see the beauty that's been here all along. The world hasn't really changed, but you have. You no longer move through it desperate to prove something. You're not chasing validation like it's oxygen. You're not performing, you're living. You work, you love, you create, but now it comes from truth, not fear. You choose not because you should, but because it feels aligned. You speak not to impress, but to express. And in doing so, you rediscover something you'd almost forgotten: peace. Not the peace of control, where everything is tidy and certain, but the peace that comes from finally letting go. Letting go of who you thought you had to be, of the old stories, of the endless fixing and striving and pleasing.
You start seeing yourself the way life sees you, as enough, as whole, as already home. And in that quiet acceptance, something beautiful happens. You start seeing others differently too. You stop judging their masks because you know what it costs to wear one. You see their fear, their longing, their quiet hope. And instead of reacting, you understand. You remember how hard it is to wake up in a world that rewards sleep. You stop trying to convince anyone of anything. You simply be. And that calm presence becomes louder than any speech you could give. That's the real revolution. Not loud, not angry, not aimed against. It's the revolution of remembrance, of souls returning home one by one without fanfare. You realize freedom was never waiting in the distance. It's been within you this entire time, waiting for you to stop running long enough to hear it whisper, "Welcome back." Because the journey was never about becoming someone new. It was always about coming back to the one who's been here all along. Maybe that's what life really is, a long, winding path of forgetting and remembering who we are. If these words found you at the right time, let them stay with you a while. Sit with them, breathe with them, live with them. And if the message resonates, share this space, subscribe, leave your reflections below, and keep walking this path of awakening with us. Because the world doesn't change when others wake up, it changes the moment you do. One remembering at a time.